So there's a miscommunication here. I was told that I would be giving a talk to a group of elderly people, and they don't see them in there. So that's my requisite elderly person joke, and that's really a positive thing because you'll see in a minute that we are all living longer and living very healthy longer. So it's not a token joke, it's a serious joke that I'm happy to do. All Stanford faculty have to give disclosures. If you hear a presentation by a faculty from Stanford who doesn't do this, tell the dean, they'll be out the door. So I do have some NIH grants, and some of the work here fits into that. I don't have any patents in this area. I don't have any stock or stock options in any company. I have no other conflict of interest. I have no felony convictions. Now, the rule is only convictions have to be reported, not charges. So, and I didn't file my income taxes yet. So there are many, many causes of hearing loss. Hearing loss can be treated by surgery or pharmaceuticals or devices. Age-related hearing loss is by far the most common. And 1/3 between the ages of 65 and 75 do have age-related hearing loss. And 1/2 of those older than 75, there's nobody older than 75 here, I don't think, have age-related hearing loss. So my presentation is going to focus on age-related hearing loss, even though there are many different kinds of other kinds of hearing loss. The main idea I want to talk about are the new technologies that can help in this area. And then I'm going to really end up with how to consider and obtain current hearing aids. So there's some benefit to having an analogy to other sensory systems. And sometimes this is useful, sometimes it's not, but I'm going to do it anyhow. So I'm going to mention vision loss and then use that as a platform to discuss hearing loss. So we have our eyeball here, and that provides us with a sense of vision. Now, the eyeball can be divided between structures that aren't nerve. There are these physical structures in front of the nerve. That's the lens and the fluid in the eye. And at the back of the eye is where we have the nerves that actually provide the sense of vision, and that sends it up to the brain. So we have problems in the visual system that can be not nerve, not neural, or problems that can be neural. If we look at the problems with vision, 40% of all vision problems are what we call refractive. It's just a focusing problem, something involved with the front of the eye before it hits the nerve. And that's very easily corrected by glasses. It refocuses and focuses on a normal neural part. So they're very effective. 2% of individuals have cataracts. That's a clouding of the lens. And that can be corrected by surgery, but that is in front of the nerve. So when that's corrected, your vision comes back perfectly normal again. There are other vision problems. 3% of the population can get macular degeneration. That's a completely different visual problem. That's where the nerves, the sensory cells for vision, are affected. And glasses can provide some benefit, but they are not replacing nerves that are not functioning. If we now take a cross-section of the ear, so you can see the ear on the side of the head, and we go into the inside, on the inner ear is where we have the neural structures, the nerve part. And we have all of these other structures in front that are not nerve. The structures in front are the eardrum and the space behind the eardrum, and there are little bones in there. All of that helps us hear, but way before the nerve part. If we now look at the problems, we have all kinds of problems in the part in front of the nerve, and those are called conductive hearing loss. There's 1% is otosclerosis. We have earwax, we have otitis media, otitis externa, perforations. I put question marks there because most of those are reversible. So at any one time, we don't know what percentage is in the population that has these because they're often completely reversible. If you put a hearing aid on top of those, it works really great because it's before it's hitting the nerve. The problem is there's really not much benefit to do that if the problem can be corrected. On the other side, this side, we have the problem with the ear that is the nerve part, the neural part. And unfortunately, that's the part that deteriorates with age. So with age-related hearing loss, we have disruption in the neural part. When we put hearing aids on, we're not changing those nerves. We're only helping it in other ways. So the misconception is that we have vision problems, glasses help a lot. We have hearing problems, and hearing aids don't help a lot. They're completely different factors. You should make the correction accordingly. Okay, so life expectancy. This is a graph from the federal government of life expectancy.
You're one slide behind.
Okay, thank you. Of life expectancy based on the year you were born. Now, don't anyone panic because this is only average. There are many, many exceptions, but basically, if you were born in 1900, the life expectancy was only in the high 40s on average. And you can see that if you're born later than that, you only have to get to 1950 and the life expectancy shoots way up. And these are projections out into 2025, and it just keeps on growing up and up. So the life expectancy is getting longer for a variety of reasons. There is a male-female difference. The females are red and the males are blue, and there's about a 10, 12-year difference between those. So basically, we're getting older, and we continue to get older, and there are many exceptions to this. The number of individuals who are 100 years of age or older is very large in the country compared to only 30 years ago. So let's talk about generations. The World War II generation, greatest generation. We have people who were in that conflict who are still with us. And they, because that's significant time back already, the numbers of those in that group are decreasing. However, we have the baby boomers coming. They're basically people who are now turning 60. It was a very large bulge in the population, so the number of people turning 60 and getting older is now very, very large and getting larger. So if you're a baby boomer, you're not alone. There are many, many people in that category. Actually, 17%, over 17% of the population are in this category. So let's see what this generation contributed. Sex, yeah, that was that group. Drugs, yep, that was that group. Rock and roll, yep, that was that group. Some of those things do affect hearing loss, many do not. So what did this generation not contribute? Tattoos. So the generation before did because the World War II vets came back with tattoos, and the younger generation does because they have tattoos. But the baby boomers are not so many tattoos, so they didn't contribute tattoos. There's not much of a relationship between tattoos and hearing loss. They also didn't do reality TV, and now we have reality TV and tattoos, and they didn't do that either. So let's talk about measures of hearing. This is a standard audiogram available throughout the country. Many of you probably have had this. It's now often part of a general health exam. And it shows the your hearing sensitivity for each ear on a graph that's upside down. So the soft sounds are up here at the top, the very loud sounds are down here at the bottom, and the different pitches are across the page. And we break it up into normal, mild, moderate, severe, and profound hearing loss. So if you have perfectly normal hearing, your marks, the red ones are for one ear, the right ear, and the blue ones are for the left ear. This is a perfectly normal hearing individual. All the marks are at the top of the page for the individual pitches. So let me play some pitches for you. Here's the one at 500. Here's one at 1,000. Here's one at 2,000. Here's one at 4,000. And here's one at 8,000. Now, how many heard the lower ones? How many heard the upper ones? So the upper ones decrease the more marijuana you smoke. So if you didn't hear any of the high, no, I'm teasing you. That's no relationship. But if we now look at speech, this area here is speech. It's generally what I'm producing now that the room is generally getting. And you can see that the speech is all available to this individual because it's farther down the page. So normal hearing and speech. If you listen to speech coming over a telephone, cell phone in particular, you don't get the whole thing. You're missing the part on the low pitches and the part on the high pitches. So here's full, and here's what you're getting from a cell phone. And you know that because when you listen on a cell phone, it doesn't sound like when you're speaking to somebody straightforward. And in fact, you do have some difficulty understanding speech. You can't hear everything on a cell phone. So if you have general speech, like I went sailing yesterday on a boat, you can figure that out even if you miss parts of it because it's a full sentence. However, if you have to give your social security number or spelling of your name, you don't say, my name is Frank. You say, that's F as in football, R as in, you have to do that because you're missing it from the telephone. That has nothing to do with your hearing. It has to do with the telephone. And it's because you're missing those ends. Now we have the hearing sensitivity of a typical 80-year-old. And you can see that the hearing sensitivity is perfectly normal in the low pitches. And that's where all of the vowel sounds are. But as you go up in the pitches, the hearing sensitivity starts dropping downward. And that's where the hearing loss is. So you have the unusual situation of saying something to someone who's 85 years old, and they say, what? And you say, I said I'm going to the safe. And they say, why are you shouting? Well, it's because the low frequency hearing is perfectly normal in that individual. It's the upper ones that are not there, and they're missing some of the words. If we now look at speech, I've drawn the whole speech symbol there, but what they're actually hearing is only part of it because this part is not available to them. It's below their hearing sensitivity. If we now let that person listen to what it is on a cell phone, they're only getting this tiny little bit in the center, and it's not unusual for an 80-year-old to have difficulty understanding speech over a telephone. So let's look at the population again. 1974, I remember 1974, the Centers for Disease Control went around the country and measured the hearing of thousands of individuals as of, and recorded their ages and plotted their graphs as according to their age. So these are the 20-year-olds, these are the 30-year-olds, these are the 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, and 60-year-olds. And you can see that the 20-year-olds in 1974 were perfectly normal. The 60s were dropping off already. So by age 60, you're falling out of the normal range. 30 years later, in 2004, the study was repeated again. Now, it's obviously not the same people, but the same age groups. And the 20s are still in the top. The 30s are still in the top. 40s are still in the normal range. By the 50s, it's starting to drop out. By the 60s, it's dropping out as well. So let's look at both together. That is the 1974 and 2004. And I take this very positively. What it means is that hearing is not getting worse over the years. So it's not improving either. And this means that age-related hearing loss in 1974 is the same as it was in 2004. And I don't know if you remember, anyone remember what a Sony Walkman is? So when the Sony Walkman came out, earphones, oh, everyone's going to be deaf, everyone's going to be deaf. Well, the Sony Walkman generation is 1974. They're now in 2004, and they aren't deaf. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. The only difference is the earphone listening is longer. And noise exposure is not just the level of the sound, how loud it is, but how long you listen to it. So the example I give is I'd much rather listen to a 100 decibel level music for an hour than a 90 decibel music 8 hours a day. The second one is actually worse on your ears than the first one. If we now look at the average in current times related to age with the audiogram that you'd get regularly with the speech on, you can see the 20s are normal, 30s, 40s. Between the 40s and the 50s, this little corner here is starting to be affected. So we can measure on a regular basis in the average population some changes in hearing that can affect ability to understand speech. By the 50s, it's worse, and by the 60s, it's worse. So if you're an average 60-year-old, you're missing a portion of normal conversational speech due to age-related hearing loss, right off the bat. So related to hearing loss, the vast majority of hearing loss is age-related, as opposed to these other medical conditions. Currently, there's no effective medical intervention for age-related hearing loss, no effective surgical intervention. It progressively worsens with age, and that's an issue because whatever we're doing to live longer is not preserving our hearing. So we're going to be very healthy, physically fit, and hear less because we got older. Now, as I said, these are just averages. We have people who come in the clinic in their 90s with almost normal hearing. We have people who come in their 40s whose ears are not so good. So the hearing becomes progressively worse with age, and it's more prevalent the longer we live. This is not a surgical medical intervention. It is not anything you can do diet-wise currently that's going to reverse it. So it really ends up being a communication problem. In reality, I didn't show the graph, but women progress less with their hearing loss than men. There's basically about a 20-year difference. So your average 80-year-old woman has the hearing of your average 60-year-old man. And that can explain some spousal issues, which I'm not going to talk about. I am going to concentrate the rest of the talk on what we can do. And what we can do is hearing aids. And the first thing I want to say is that there are still common things in the literature. Oh, these hearing aids don't work. There's no benefit. I bought them and I put them in the drawer and I don't use them. All of those are wrong now. If you look at the lay literature, New York Times, Consumer Reports, they don't say that anymore. They say hearing aids are beneficial, just don't overpay to get them. That's a fundamental difference that's occurred in the since about 2007. And I'll tell you why. And the idea of putting it in the drawer, if somebody buys a hearing aid and doesn't wear it and puts it in the drawer, that's an economics problem. It's not a hearing problem or any other problem because it is a federal law to allow return of hearing aids within 30 days. So I encourage everybody to try hearing aids under any circumstance because there's always, by mandate, a 30-day trial period. You can't do that with your artificial knee. or your kidney replacement, but you can do that with hearing aids. So we should never hear hearing aids don't work. They can and usually do provide benefit. They don't restore your hearing to normal for age-related hearing loss. And we should never hear, oh, I bought it and put it in the drawer, because you shouldn't put it in the drawer. You should take it back and get your money back. So what is a hearing aid? A hearing aid is something that is always too large. It must amplify sound 1,000,000 times, but not noise. It must operate without failure in the body temperature, 98. You know, would you put your television set in a room that was 98 degrees? In a sea of perspiration, a cloud of cosmetics, or all three. And it's also something one puts off for 10 years, that's actually documented, but cannot do without for 30 minutes when it has to be serviced. The last thing is, it is a medical device. These are approved by the FDA. And one of my points I always like to make is that it is not a consumer device. There are plenty of consumer devices. Hearing aid is not one of them. It's a FDA controlled device. So we've had many evolutions. This is a cross-section of the ear with a computer chip that I was involved with developing in 1981. And that's the smallest we could get it and still function as a hearing aid. So you can see it was a big square thing that took, you know, half the size of your ear. And we've progressed with getting these computer chips smaller and smaller and smaller, so that next year, here's where we are. You can hardly see the thing. And so the point of this is that we don't need to make a hearing aid chip smaller and smaller and smaller. Instead, we should keep it something like this size, but since it is that size, in current technology, you can add many more things to it. So my point here is that there's no need to shrink it any further, the computer part, but take advantage of all of that extra computer power and put other things in it. And that's really what's happened since 2007. We've added many, 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 many more things onto that computer, which we're going to talk about. So add features. Here's what we're adding. Wireless connectivity. You hear it as Bluetooth. We connect wirelessly to cell phones. We connect wirelessly to television sets, to remote microphones, to the internet, to your GPS system, to the car. And that's all done wirelessly. And the reason we can do that is we can take the same size computer chip, but its power, its computing power, gets bigger and bigger and bigger, even though the size doesn't. And we add all of these other things. Other things we've added are speech recognition. And you know, you've seen the iPhone, the person called Siri. You can press the button and ask Siri a question. I think there's a movie about it called Her that's recent. So these computers are able to understand speech, and that has some advantages. They're able to process noise. They can distinguish between noise and not noise. They can distinguish between music and speech. So if you have a hearing aid adjusted for you to understand speech, but now you're listening to music, it doesn't sound so good. If you're listening to music and then want to listen to speech, they're set for two different things. So the hearing aids can detect that and change accordingly automatically. You don't even know it. Another big change that's occurred just in the last 5 years is automated controls. We now are doing hearing aids that have no controls on them at all. And the patients don't want the controls. You don't want to be fiddling with volume controls. We can give them to you, but a vast majority of the hearing aids that the patients want are totally automatic and adaptive. The hearing aid senses the environment, adjusts itself for that environment, and presents the right sound to you, and the patient doesn't even know that it's doing that. So these automatic features are getting rid of controls rather than adding controls, even though underneath there's many, many controls. The other thing that you may have been aware of is hearing aids start whistling. That's largely a problem solved. We can use the computer techniques to get rid of that problem completely. If you're wearing a hearing aid, it should never whistle at all. If it is whistling, it's not adjusted correctly, or it's an older hearing aid. Basically a solved problem. The last feature I want to mention is something called data logging. So the computer can log what's coming through it. So we can take a hearing aid off a person who's worn it for a week, plug it into our computer, and get a recording of everyone they've listened to in the no, that's not true. We could do that, but we don't. That would not be good. That's another spousal thing. But what we can do is this. We say, okay, Mr. Jones, we want you to wear this hearing aid 2 hours a day until you get used to it, and then another week, 3 hours a day, and then 5 hours a day. And then Mr. Jones comes back, did you do that? Oh yes, I had a piece of paper, I checked it off, I did that exactly. We plug it in and look, and it says they didn't have it on, they had it on 1 day and not 3 days in a row. But I didn't think, I mean, we already knew that. But one of the most important things, and this happens repeatedly now, we get a patient who comes back in and says, oh, I don't really need a hearing aid. You know, somehow a hearing aid means you're really bad off. And so I only need it to hear my wife. I only need it to hear certain things. And I just wear it occasionally because I only need it occasionally. I'm fine otherwise. And you plug it in and you look at it and they're wearing it 12 hours a day, every day. And we see that also. So that's a feature that helps us, not you, directly. But it helps get through the adaptation process that is important. And after that, we don't listen in on your conversations. Cell phones, very big thing. The idea is that we now connect the standard hearing aids to things like cell phones. And let me talk about that. People who have so mild hearing loss that 7 years ago we would never have considered a hearing aid for them. Their hearing aid, they had a hearing loss, but it was very mild. But the benefit of listening to the cell phone is so much that they're getting the hearing aids. So we have younger people getting hearing aids only because they can understand better through the cell phone or in other situations. So this is 2003 hearing aid, the kind that fits behind your ear. It has all of these components in it. And I didn't have a scale here, but it basically is as big as your finger and fits behind the ear. And that's only 11 years ago. We now can get them this small, and all of these same components are stuffed into this little thing. So I'm going to talk about miniaturization and what that has to do. You've probably heard in the news something called the Lyric. It's a completely in the canal hearing aid. It's also called extended wear because a professional, us, has to put it in, and it stays in for the length of its battery life, which was supposed to be about 4 months, 3.5 months or something like that. Then when it goes out, you have to go to a professional again to have it pulled out and a new one placed in. But in between time, you have no, you don't have to change batteries or take it out. And you can see how tiny it is by the size of the dime. Since then, and in just the last couple of years, we can do the same thing with regular hearing aids, get them that small with a little, it's actually like fishing line, and put that in there. And the big difference is this one does not have any features at all. All it is an amplifier, no features at all. Whereas this one is a full digital hearing aid and has many other features as well. But you can take it in and out yourself. This one is called a behind the ear open fit. And what that means is that this hearing aid, we're blocking the ear canal. We're giving you a hearing loss to put this hearing aid on because we've completely blocked your ear canal. We now take this open thing that's got all kinds of vents in it and put that in the ear canal, and your regular sound can come in the natural way. It's much more comfortable. And we've now got the behind the ear type that are very small. Here's our dime, and here's the size of this thing. In fact, these now come in colors, and a patient we had yesterday got ruby red. it didn't occur to me. So our audiologist asked her why, she was also 88 years old, and asked her why she got ruby red. And she said, so I can see it. I've got a vision problem too. So she was not trying to make a fashion statement. But these things are so small, you set them on the table, and if you have a vision problem, you can't find them. So we're moving to a new facility, and one of the things we actually did was bring in samples of carpet that we're going to put in the new facility, because people drop these little tiny things and they fall on the carpet and you can't find them, including people with normal vision. So tiny, 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 no plugging the ear. And I submit that this is what it looks like. This is the part that goes in the ear, and this is the part that's behind the ear to give you a sense of scale. But in reality, it really looks like this. So here's the size, and here's what it looks like. But your ear canal is completely open. And I maintain that this tiny little wire here going down, plus the tiny little thing in the back, is actually less visible than stuffing things in your ear that people can see. So the completely in the canal, like this one, is actually mostly visible because you can see it. It gives you an additional hearing loss. Your own voice sounds not good, and you can get that sense. If you start talking just by plugging your ear, you hear your own voice. It sounds funny. And your ear feels full. And there's some comfort issues. Only about half of the population have a big enough ear canal to get these down in there. They are easy to insert. It's one piece and you can put them in and out. The behind the ear is sitting behind the ear, and there's a tiny little cable to a part that goes in the ear canal, and you can see this is all open here, much more comfortable. And so here's the categories. We have the behind the ear, the older style, the behind the ear, and this is actually being worn. You can hardly see it on this individual's ear. The in the ear, you can see it. This is a completely in the canal. The in the ear, and some of them we can't even get in that far. So these are actually more visible, even though people think they're not, than the behind the ear. Controls, when it's in your ear or behind your ear, we don't want to put controls on them because they're tiny. So we've been giving remote controls for many, many years. They're going to hear buzz about apps, iPhone apps for controlling your hearing aid. We've been doing that. The professionals have been doing that for 3 years now. So you can control the thing on your iPhone if you wish, but that is even going away because the patients don't want to control anything. And we put the automatic controls in, but you can control them with remotes that look like little key fobs as well. So here's just a summary. No device, the behind the ear, the in the ear, and the completely in the ear canal. And I've given a rating scale between 0 or 1 and 10. 10 being good, 1 being bad. So the effectiveness is really not very good without a hearing aid. These are very effective, these are very effective, these are very effective. The benefit, there's no benefit to not having an aid. These are beneficial, these are beneficial, these are beneficial. Invisibility, why isn't this a 0? If you don't have a hearing aid, it should be totally invisible, right? It really isn't. If you go around like this all the time and say, what? What? It's very visible. It's way more visible than having a behind the ear thing. And that actually is true. I mean, it's not a joke. So this is somewhat visible. This can be less, but these numbers are fairly close. Put on and take off with no device, it's easy. This is a little bit harder at first, but after a while, it's easy to put on. The physical comfort, these are extremely comfortable. They're very, very light. Nothing's filling your ear, and they're resting on your ear. The biggest problem we have is that patients don't have to control them. They switch automatically, so the hearing is automatic. They can't feel anything. It doesn't interfere with their glasses. They go and take a shower. Well, you take a shower with a hearing aid on. That's not a... But they just forget to take it off because it's comfortable. Your own voice sounds great, better than these. You don't feel full. You can completely control it, and there's no whistling. So only in 2002, 2003, for the in-the-ear type in red compared to the behind-the-ear type in blue, about 80% was in the ear. People thought they were invisible. They weren't. And about 15% was the behind the ear. Now with the tiny, tiny, tiny open fit ones, it started to change. About 2006, 7, they switched. They're about half and half. And now, I don't have the numbers for 2014 yet because it's the beginning of the year. But it's clear to me and others that about 80-some% are going to be the behind the ear that are small, tiny, comfortable. And only about 15% will be in the ear. Dramatic, dramatic change. Okay, so 2 hearing aids. We have 2 ears on. We use the 2 ears for a variety of things. The most important is ability to hear speech in noise. So the fact that we have 2 ears compared to 1 allows us to hear speech in noise better than having just 1 ear. Another thing we can do is if we have 2 ears, we're able to tell where sounds are coming from. And why is that important? Well, everyone says you hear the bus and it's not going to run over you because you can get out of the way. And that's partly true, although deaf people don't get run over by buses any more than non-hearing impaired people. But an important thing is if you're in a group conversation, you can tell who's talking. You immediately get your head to the right spot. Why is that important? We get a big piece of communication by lip reading without even taking lip reading lessons. And if you have any kind of hearing problem or normal hearing, and you can figure out in a group of 3, 8, 10 people who's talking and you get your head turned at the right place at the right time, you have an immediate improvement in communication ability that is only partially related to your hearing. So here's the current situation. Here are 2 hearing aids. Let's see. In about 1994, only 60% of people got 2 hearing aids. That's steadily going up. In the last decade, it's hit about 85%, and I think in 2014 it'll be about the same. There'll always be some reason, either you have deafness on one side completely or some other reason why not everyone can wear 2 hearing aids. But the wearing 2 hearing aids has tremendous benefit for ability to understand in noise, ability to tell where sounds are coming from, and it is not related to making the provider rich, which it used to be. Oh, you get 2 of them. Buy 3, keep 1 in the drawer as a spare. But it's truly beneficial, documented, measurable benefit to having 2. So here's the left and right hearing aid. Wireless connections to tell. Anyone remember what this? Oh, yeah. So has anyone gotten an email that says, pardon my typographical errors, I'm doing this from an iPhone? So one of my colleagues wrote that. It says, pardon my typographical errors, I'm doing this from a rotary dial phone. So the hearing aids talk to the phones. The hearing aids talk to each other. And there's some big advantage because sounds come from one side to the other. So there are radio stations in there, and they talk to each other and make the automatic adjustments. We can put a streamer on, and this can be worn around the neck, underneath your shirt, and that provides benefits. The biggest benefit is that we can't get radio stations small enough into the hearing aids, so we have to get them bigger. So you have to wear this other piece, this third piece, but that piece can connect to your television set. So we routinely now have hearing aids connected to the television set, so the male of the family who has control of the remote, it's not in my family, but I've heard that, they usually turn the television up loud without a hearing aid. Now they turn their hearing aid up and hear the television so that other people come in the room and they see the guy watching television laughing, and the television's the sound is completely off. They say, why are you listening with it off? Oh, sorry. And you have to turn up the television. It can connect to your iPhone. It can connect to a remote microphone. So we now have these little devices, not much bigger than a pack of gum. You can go to a restaurant. The person sitting across from you might be 7 feet away in a noisy restaurant. You put this thing on the table. You can also get an app, so it's an iPhone. You put that on the table near where they're speaking. So they speak to the device on the table, which is only this far away, gets a nice good signal. But from that device to your hearing aid, 10 feet away, is wireless. And it's just like standing right in front of the person. And you can use these remotes and put them around. People don't even know you're putting them around. So let's talk about remotes. So here's an auditorium. We now are putting very old technology called a loop. It's a wire that goes completely around the auditorium. You don't even see it. It's up in the wall. And there's the performer, like me, has a microphone on. But we now put it on this wire, which means that you can put a hearing aid anywhere in the auditorium, way, way up here in the nosebleed section, and you hear what's on the stage just as if you were on the stage yourself. And that's a wireless thing. If you have your hearing aids with the telecoil in them, and there's a loop system, and it's got this symbol, all you do is flip it on. Sometimes it's automatic, which means you get the benefit of this without doing anything. If you don't wear a hearing aid, you can get these, and I highly recommend these if you don't have a hearing aid. You can just grab them in the lobby for many performances, and what happens is the broadcast of the signal is done by light, which you can't see, and it hits these, and you can wear these anywhere in the audience. So you can be sitting way, way up here, and it's just like if you were sitting on the stage. So we have option 1 is the loop system for hearing aids. Option 2, even if you don't have hearing aids, get these. You take them, and then you put them back at the end of the performance. They're very beneficial. Okay, so last thing is I want to answer some questions. Do I need a hearing aid? Okay, that depends on a lot of different factors. Your hearing is normal, age-related hearing loss, it gradually goes down. There's not a cutoff that says, oh, now you need it. It's very gradual, basically over a decade between when you don't have a problem and when you do have a problem. So it really depends on factors like the kind of hearing loss you have, and I'm only talking about age-related hearing loss, the shape of it, your lifestyle. If you live alone, and you stay in your house by yourself most of the time, there's much less need for a hearing aid, which is a bad thing. You should get out. And one of the problems is because people have even minor communication problems, they tend not to go out. That's a double whammy. You should go out. But it's lifestyle things as well. There's also evidence, which I now believe, I didn't believe the original, but as hearing loss increases, there's less communication, and they claim, based on research, is that if you increase the communication or increase the sound, it can stave off the onset of Alzheimer's. So there's a good reason to get engaged with the community and hear more for cognitive reasons. Why do hearing aids cost so much? Here's the costs. I don't have the 2014, but it really hasn't changed very much. So on average, about $2,000. But look at this range. You can get them for $700 or for $4,600. What's the difference? Well, let's first of all talk about cost. This is the latest data that we have. It's from 2009. 60% are cash only. Okay, so you got to come up with the cash. But that's changing dramatically. Look at these other categories. A big one is the Veterans Administration. You WW2 veterans or you Vietnam veterans, first thing I do is go off to the VA because they're doing a fantastic job with hearing aids. And you know, that's 16% right off the bat, and that's totally covered by your service. But we have some HMOs starting to provide. Medicaid always provides. Medicare doesn't. There's just a tiny piece of people who are on Medicare, not the usual Medicare age-related things. And insurance, this is the one that's very difficult to change. In '09, the insurance part was small. The insurance part now is much, much larger. It's not for the whole hearing aid. So it depends on your insurance company. We now have an arrangement where the insurance company says you have a hearing aid benefit, we'll pay some amount of money. And it depends on the plan, it depends on, it's not Medicare, it depends on your insurance plan. So next year I expect this number to be much bigger and this number to be smaller, but it's going to be very difficult to quantify because it's not either or. The situation we have now is a portion of either. So the government, Senate and House of Representatives, very, very close to passing, which is, there's bipartisan support, something called a tax credit. It's $500 per hearing aid. That's $1,000 for 2 hearing aids. And that's a tax credit. It's not a tax deduction. That's real dollars. And what that means is this. If you get a bill for $4,500 for 2 hearing aids and $1,000 tax credit, it's now $3,500, and your insurance company pays $2,000, you're now down to $1,500, which makes it much more reasonable. And that trend is going on right now. We have quite a few patients who come in who now have some kind of insurance benefit for hearing aids. It's nowhere near what it, full coverage, but that plus the tax credit takes it into the a different category. Okay, so here's our 80-year-old, and here's the speech that they can hear, and here's the speech that they're missing, right here. Okay. Unusual or hard to understand sounds that get up this loud. Remember, louder is down here. Doesn't change that much. So it's very easy for age-related hearing loss to have sounds that are too loud. So if you take a hearing aid off the shelf, it's very likely it's going to do this. It's going to leave this alone, amplify this down the page, but look what's happening here. The patient can hear this speech now with the hearing aid on, but it's too loud. It's going into their uncomfortable loudness level. So you have to do many additional adjustments, and if you get it like this, then you have a very happy hearing aid where they hear the soft sounds, it's not too loud. The problem is it takes a great deal of adjustments to get that point. So to do it correctly, you need a measurement facility, you need complete diagnostic audiology, you need something called real ear measures, you need a comprehensive lab, and you need often to make ear mold impressions. Even the open fit ones are benefiting from tiny little ear molds to get all of this to work right. So you begin to hear things, well, I can get a hearing aid on the internet, CVS. What about the AARP magazine? How about an iPhone app? I can get a hearing aid on an iPhone app. What about Costco, Walmart? Okay, so you can buy these. They cannot be called hearing aids by federal law. So even though they look like a hearing aid, they have to be called a personal sound amplification product, PSAP, P-S-A-P. You can buy them on the internet, but if you're buying them on the internet, they better not say hearing aid because it's against the law. However, that's only in the United States, so we have companies selling these outside of the United States, which you can get on a website, and they do call them hearing aids. You can get devices that fit in your ear that you control with an app. You can get your regular smartphone and put earbuds in and use it as a hearing aid as well. So I'd like to make a comparison here. Here's a single hearing aid, but to get it on the usual way, you need diagnostic measures, evaluations, all kinds of device services, physical fits. Somebody's got to get this on so that it doesn't interfere with your glasses and is comfortable. We've been unable to develop a universal fit hearing aid that works. We have to get the auditory fit. We have to get all of the adjustments to your cell phone, to your television set. Multiple visits. If you've gone 7 years with a hearing loss, denying it, and then now you put a hearing aid on, you're going to say, especially you flush the toilet or something, it's way too loud. So we have to go through this process with multiple visits until it gets right. Warranty in the device. So the $2,500 hearing aid is, it can be purchased for $400, but somebody's paying for all of this other stuff. Let's talk about an artificial knee. An artificial knee is $50,000. You need all of these things to get it on, including surgery, the hospital, physical therapy, medication, multiple visits, the copay. The surgeon is not making $50,000 on an artificial knee. The audiologist is not making $2,500 on the device. If you get these devices without the professional input, it sounds like the Audiologist Work Preservation Act, right? But it's the way it is. You can get a personal amplifier that looks like a hearing aid and it's $400. You can get an artificial knee for $400 too, but what are you going to do with it? You can't put it on. So the analogy I tried to come up with is a mobility device. So if you're having trouble with your knee, you can go to the CVS and buy a cane. You can also buy Tylenol, and you now have about $20 into it, but you don't have any of these services here at all. Okay, so this is an option, an alternative, but just remember you're on your own. In reality, I'm way the other side. I think even for mobility devices, I'm a co-director of the Stanford Balance Center, and we're very, because balance problems can originate in the ear as well, and we're very concerned about mobility, and things like the wrong length cane can cause some problems. So I'm way the other way. I think people ought to be involved to help with all of these conditions. So please walk away from here with one thing only. Instead of asking the question, why do hearing aids cost so much? Because they don't. You should ask the question, why does it cost so much to get a hearing aid? It's just like the artificial knee. Why do artificial knees cost so much? The artificial knee doesn't cost much at all. It costs a lot to get it on. Why does my new TV, which has more technology than my hearing aid, costs half as much? Cell phones sell 1 billion a year. TVs 200 million a year. Hearing aids are only 2.6 million. If this number went to this number, the cost of the hearing aid would go down. Instead of $400, it'd be $200. But that's not going to change the fitting part very much at all, unless you do something else to get rid of the fitting part. And that's related to this. How many people have a remote for their television? How many people use it to turn it on and off? It's about everybody. How many use it to change the volume control? How many use it to change the channel control? Well, this thing's got 31 buttons on it. How many use other buttons at all? Be honest. Use 1, 2 maybe. Other remotes have 100 buttons on them. And they adjust this thing very, very carefully. Nobody does that because it's very complicated to do so. It's the same with a hearing aid. The hearing aids, when you put them on, they have 100 adjustments inside that all interact. And if you're an engineer, you can figure it out. I doubt if you can figure it out with an internet site. But that's the main issue. And the issue is that if you don't get it adjusted correctly, then it's it's not optimal. What is the best hearing aid? I think the question really should be not what is the best hearing aid, who is the best audiologist? That would be me. So who's the best audiologist in the Bay Area other than me? That would be anyone at Stanford. What is the best facility? That would be Stanford. What is the best? I'm just teasing. The question is the professional audiologist and the facility. There is nothing wrong with going to Costco, getting a licensed audiologist, and getting a less expensive hearing aid because it's at Costco, or Walmart, or Stanford, or PAMF, or Kaiser Permanente. It's the professional providing it and the facility. That's the questions. These are the major manufacturers of hearing aids. We cannot distinguish among them for auditory or features. So if some manufacturer comes out with a new wireless connection, all the others come out fairly soon as well. And we do consider things that are not auditory as much as they are the quality of the switches and the features that are available. So our clinic and many other clinics fit all of these. I would be leery of a facility that only provides one manufacturer, because they're getting a commission from that manufacturer, and you're stuck with that manufacturer's device, period. Features, rechargeable. We're now getting rechargeable batteries instead of buying new ones every 2 weeks. We have the fashion statement, and I already talked about that. So let's talk about some features. These are common features available in today's hearing aids. No more whistling. We have active mechanisms inside for helping reduce the noise coming in. I talked about the automatic controls, no volume control, no switching things back and forth. You just walk around and wear it. They're all highly configurable. We can configure them to match your hearing aid, your hearing. They have internal memories. They all have many, even the lowest cost ones now have many different memories, so that they can have a setting for listening to music, a setting for listening to speech, and all of the other acoustic environments. We can, you can get wireless features that connect to remote microphones, television sets, cell phones, and other systems. We talked about the remote control. This is kind of a big thing. They're now all water resistant. That doesn't mean stick them in a glass of water. It does mean that the repairs are less related to moisture, and that really works. We talked about rechargeable batteries, and there's a new thing called frequency transposition, which is not generally for age-related hearing loss. So, just as a summary, prevention for age-related hearing loss, there's something coming down related to preventing aging, and you're talking about antioxidants. That's probably something you start a lot earlier, though, as opposed to doing something about it now. You can prevent the effects of noise exposure, and that's something you want to do all along. Chemotherapy pharmaceutical agents have known ototoxic ear effects. We are working very, very closely with the Cancer Center to monitor hearing during that, and also trying to develop better drugs that get the cancer but not get the ear. We actually have a project in our department on the antibiotics. They're very powerful antibiotics that are the same thing. You need them to get the infection, but under high enough dosages, they can damage the ear. So we're trying to invent better antibiotics. We talked about all the improvement in devices. And the biggest thing is we also have started an initiative on curing, biologically curing hearing loss, putting me out of business. So we have the Stanford initiative to cure hearing loss, and we have several biological approaches, none available tomorrow, related to stem cells or gene therapy to actually go in and take the missing cells and regrow them. And we're very excited about that for the future. So, patients are living longer. Devices improve function in many cases, even those with mild hearing loss. Effective technology continues and is effective today, and they're much more than improvement of hearing. Thank you very much. I ran a little bit over. So we have questions. Yes. The question is, my friend had a stroke and is now having difficulty hearing and also speaking. So the stroke affects the brain, which is beyond the ear. So those kind of problems are not improved by making sounds louder or adjusting for the ear. It's because the problem is beyond the ear into the brain. So there's nothing related to hearing aids that can improve that.
How about digitizing on the screen the audio?
So there are the question is, what about providing another kind of signal onto a screen? So basically, if you're having trouble hearing, you can give an alternative signal, like on the screen, of text, for instance. And now our ability, like with the smartphones, of changing somebody speaking to text is getting very, very good. In fact, I would point out that many television programs automatically have something called closed captioning. So you can turn your television on to get that. And we have many people who have mild hearing loss. They still have trouble watching television. So you can get the captioning on the television directly. So that technology is available not in the hearing aid, but in the displays already, the television. Yeah, he mentioned a Kurzweil. A Kurzweil is a speech recognition device. So you talk into it, and text comes out on the screen. So there are many other assistive devices that can help people with significant hearing loss, but that's not a hearing aid. It's beyond. Your audiologist can help with those also. So the question is there a difference between the behind-the-ear types and the in-the-ear types that interact with the type of hearing loss? For age-related hearing loss, no. The function you get from the behind-the-ear is the same as the function you get from the in-the-ear type. However, there are medical conditions in the ear that are chronic conditions that putting something in the ear aggravates the problem. So an in the ear would be inappropriate for that particular chronic medical condition. It's a small percentage. It's not age-related hearing loss. So there is a difference in type for those. But if you take age-related hearing loss in the ear versus behind the ear, functionally they're the same. They do differ on other features, ability to connect to phones and things, but the hearing part is the same for both. So the question is, what about the differences in manufacturers? The components of a hearing aid are often produced from the same manufacturer of the internal components. It's not unusual to get one manufacturer that uses a microphone produced by this company, completely different manufacturer uses the same microphone from that company. So it's very difficult to measure differences in hearing aids that are functionally. There are differences. You can buy a cheap one and the switches break and it's repaired, takes longer to repair, or it's in their shop longer. There are the kinds of things, features you're interested in, what you hear, how it fits, is it comfortable, are available from all of the major manufacturers. There's not much difference between them. There are differences in devices, but they're not related to auditory performance. Okay, so the question is, what about ringing in your ears, tinnitus or tinnitus? That's tomato and tomato. I like to use the term tinnitus because tinnitus sounds like otitis, which is an infection, and tinnitus is not an infection, but both are correct. So there's a large percentage of the population that do have ringing in the ears. The ringing in the ears can start with an ear issue, and it can be very bothersome. The first reaction people have when this happens is, what do I have a tumor? Is there some other problem? So you need to, make sure that nothing else is going on. And when a percentage of those people learn to live with it, but there's another big chunk of people who don't learn to live with it. And the main issue that's occurred with improving understanding of that is in the last decade or decade and a half, we've now realized that it is more a brain problem than an ear problem. It can start in the ear, but the circuits of the brain get out of whack and they go out of control and you get the ringing, but the source is in the ear, so in the brain. So we now have research projects that are looking at brain function to compensate for that. It also turns out that of the people who have ringing in the ears and they get a hearing aid, the act of wearing the hearing aid tamps down that tinnitus. So we don't do it as an intervention for tinnitus, but that's a very common reaction. Now, there's about 12 million people in the country, which is a lot of people, who have very severe ringing, and they're very, very bothered by it, and they have not much intervention that helps. And we are, others are looking at applying sound, because we're getting this from the hearing aids, applying sound to disrupt those circuits in the brain and get that brain back on track again. That's a phenomenon called neuroplasticity. When we learn things, when we get different stimuli, our brain circuits actually change. And so we're trying to, not me particularly, but we have research projects that are trying to use sound as an input to get those out of whack circuits back on track again. And there's some promise for that. Other researchers are using magnetic stimulation, again, to affect the brain circuits, to disrupt those out of whack circuits. But for many people, there's no ringing. For a big chunk of people, there is ringing. For a fair portion of those who get a hearing aid, the ringing is tamped down, but there's still 12 million people who are very, very bothered by this, and we are making progress, but we don't have any solutions yet. Okay, so she's saying with her hearing aids she doesn't hear at the TheaterWorks. The reasons for that are, one, TheaterWorks doesn't have a loop. I don't know if they do or not. Or your hearing aids don't have the telecoil, which may also be the case, in which case the hearing aids won't work. And if that's the case, if there's no loop or your hearing aids don't have it, I'd take them out and put the infrared in. Or if you don't have any hearing aids, use the infrared anyhow, because those flip right up like here without a hearing aid. If the hearing aid is connected, I would use that always, because that's adjusted for your hearing. The infrared is not. That's an average. The questions he had was about the lyric hearing, which is this one. You can see it's very tiny. It is deep into the ear canal. A professional has to put it in. It only fits about half the population because the ear canal is too small. When it is down in there, it has a battery, and it was intended to last about 3 months, but they, on average, last only about 6 weeks. And then somebody else has to take it out and put another one in with a fresh battery. Because it is completely in the ear canal, you can do things like wear helmets and other things over your ears without interfering. These are not digital, and because of that, they have no digital suppression, no whistling suppression. These are the same size. You can put them in and out yourself. They are full digital, and they have many of the features. Because they're completely in the canal, you can do exactly the same thing with a helmet or a ski mask as well. They also have the whistling suppression, so you can get the whistling by putting things over it. The digital ones make it go away. So those are the differences. One other difference I want to mention here is that these have to be put in by a professional. If you are traveling and the battery runs out, you now have, you can't ignore it because you now have additional hearing loss because your ear is plugged, that you can't, I think they give you a grappling hook, you can pull it out, but you can't get another one. So the question is what is actually going on in the ear with age-related hearing loss, and what is coming down in the future on stem cells? So here's the inner ear, deep in your head, not very accessible. We're developing ways to get access to it with microscopes. And inside there are something called hair cells. And they're called hair cells because they're tiny little cells with hairs that stick out of them. And as the sound goes by, it bends them, and that causes a sensation of hearing. There are about 20,000 hair cells in the ear. And those gradually quit working and die in age-related hearing loss. They die in a particular part of the ear more than another part of the ear. So the high-pitched ones die first, and the low-pitched ones are more robust. And the reasons they die were, in fact, if I knew the reason they die, I would start studying Swedish because I'd want to go get my Nobel Prize. What happens in the population, age-related, is those gradually disappear. Now, it turns out that in reptiles, amphibians, birds, those can die, but they have the ability of growing them back. Mammals, they die and it's permanent. So the way we're looking at this now is that evolutionarily, the ear was able to regenerate, but mammals lost that function. So we now have major research efforts to try to understand that, to return that function, as opposed to recreating the function. So we have many projects associated with adding pharmaceuticals to get them to start growing again, or put new stem cells in to get them to grow again. And we also have something called, we don't have, but we're working on something called gene therapy. Some hearing losses have a genetic component, and we're trying to understand that as well. So I think the future is bright for that. It's not tomorrow. And we have a very large project with many investigators working on that to restore a function that mammals we lost, that birds didn't lose, snakes didn't lose, turtles didn't lose, and try to understand how we can get mammals to return that function. So the question is, what about insurance for hearing aids? It's a very good idea to get insurance and warranty coverage for those reasons. So with insurance or with warranty coverage, the loss or damage can restore the hearing, get a hearing aid back for you. So it's a very good thing to have, especially since they are small, and they are also in a very hostile environment that is moist and warm, hot. So it's I think it's a good thing, and all of the manufacturers have warranty coverage that includes loss, and also you can get insurance. So the question is if you have gradual hearing loss and now you put a hearing aid on and restore some hearing function, can your brain use that? And the answer is yes. And the concept is called neuroplasticity. And basically, if you remove hearing input, completely, the parts of the brain associated with that start doing other kinds of functions. It's a very long process. I think a more important process is something called adaptation. So the usual person waits 7 years before they do anything. They haven't had drastic change in hearing. It's been very gradual. You put a hearing aid on. If you adjust the hearing aid like it's supposed to be, the patient will reject it. It's too loud. They're hearing things they hadn't heard before. If you take them through the process over a couple of weeks and gradually turn up the sound, the brain adapts, and then the patient wants to hear it at the right level. So the most common scenario is a gradual loss of hearing. Earlier the better, but people wait, and you start putting a hearing aid on. They start hearing sounds that they weren't used to hearing. They have to go through an adaptation process, get used to hearing those sounds again, gradually turn up the sounds until about a month later or 6 weeks later, the brain's functioning on with what it can use, and you get the benefit. So the question is hearing loss and balance. So this inner part of our ear right here is where we have the hearing part. Right next door, you see these little canals? That's called the balance system. And you can expect that if you have a problem here, it's not unusual to have a problem here as well. So we have something called the Stanford Balance Center that's concerned with balance disorders. And what we've done that's different from the rest of the world is that we concentrate on all of the sources of balance. So you can have a balance problem because your legs are weak, or because you're taking drugs that are interaction, or because that part of your balance system in your ear is also affected. And so we bring not just people in our department, but multidisciplinary to figure these complicated balance cases out. A portion of them are the ear problems, and we're concerned about that too. They're not one-to-one. We have people with hearing loss without balance problems, people with balance problems without hearing loss, and both together. The question is what about hearing aids 8 years ago versus now? And she also mentioned, which is exactly true, in 8 years, the hearing aids probably didn't change, but your hearing probably did. So the overall result is a combination of the hearing aid and your hearing. Now, we've gone through very, very large technological advances over about that period, about the last 8 years. In my opinion, annual hearing tests are independent of hearing aids. You should be getting that anyhow, as just like you get a physical. But separate from that, all hearing aids have a trial period, and I think it's worthwhile, even if you have hearing aids, especially during an annual hearing evaluation, to review with the professional what's available and what's changed since then, including some demonstrations that might be able to be done. Also, to look at the relationship between the feature that you're getting and the amount of money it costs. So let's say the feature is leopard color hearing aid, and it's going to cost you another $4,000 to get that. Some people, that might be really, really important and do that. Others, they say, well, leopard is not my color. I don't need to spend another $4,000. But in the 8-year period you're talking about, we've now added whistling reduction that is totally solved. We've now added automated features, no volume controls. We've now added connections to television sets, cell phones. So all of those can be investigated. And a very, very common result is, well, now I understand those features. I understand what it's going to cost to do it. I'm happy with the ones I've got. Or another one is, my hearing aid doesn't have those. I think it's worth it to get those. And if you get them and you try them and you don't like them, you have 45 days. By law, you have 30 days. Stanford has 45 days to return them. You can't do that with your artificial knee. So the question is, we know that excessive noise, loud noises, damages hearing, and now we're putting devices in that make loud noises. The answer to that is you can put a misadjusted hearing aid on and have too loud of noises and cause damage. But part of the fitting procedure is to make sure that the soft sounds get amplified to safe levels, but the unsafe levels don't go in there, including the area where you have the hearing loss. So in general, especially with age-related hearing loss, we can provide enough amplification, not too much, and not cause any damage from the excessive noise. The hearing aid wearers generally don't have additional hearing loss from wearing the hearing aid. They might have additional hearing loss for other reasons, but not from wearing a correctly adjusted hearing aid. So the question is what about compatibility for all of these other devices? Nora's looking at me, I got to finish. This is a highly changeable technology, and part of the fitting process goes through that, so that when you walk out the door, your hearing aid is connected to your television and your cell phone, and you know how to use it. It's part of the fitting process. All of the major manufacturers allow that wireless capability. It's going through the process to make sure that it works with all of your devices. Okay, it's not a trivial matter. Okay.
Just for the videotaping. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.